Yeah, today's topic is going to be that most of life is really subjective. So I came to this conclusion that we as people tend to see things from our perspective, rightfully so, and to a degree we expect other people to. It's hard for people to consider different circumstances or backgrounds or socioeconomic statuses or whatever the case is. It's that's I think that's like that consideration is more or less what we call empathy. And for whatever reason, it's not really our default. Um and because many of us, it's a little bit difficult for us to extend that grace to others. We tend to not only be very opinionated, but get very upset that other people do not share our opinion. And I feel like it actually clouds our judgment to where something could be an opinion, we start taking it as right and wrong. You were right, I'm wrong, or vice versa. I'm right, you were wrong. Because how could you possibly not see it in the way that I see it? No way around it. We do this a whole lot, especially in the realm of politics, especially in that realm. And I'll talk about why I consider that to be subjective. But what's freed me a lot is to realize that a lot of life is really subjective because I don't feel that I have the jurisdiction over anyone's thoughts or feelings, and vice versa. No one has that over me as well, which is a view that not very many people honestly, they may say, like, I'm open-minded, blah, 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 until they meet someone more open-minded than them. This has been my experience. Um, like when I'm talking to someone, when I'm listening to someone, I'm not listening to them with the lens of like, oh yeah, I know what you're about, or I know where this is going, or something like that. I'm talking to them, I'm speaking to them, I'm listening, truly listening, not just hearing, from a perspective of, all right, let me find the truth in what you say. Even if the whole thing is a little shaky, there's something there. And I find that when I have most conversations, unfortunately, um, people are not as considerate of that on the other side, that they're more looking at like the ways in which I'm wrong or the ways in which someone's wrong, the error in their thinking and how they're right. It's more about like them being right than it is so much me being wrong. Or maybe it's even, I don't know. But anyways, so I found a freedom in not thinking that I can lord an opinion over someone, that I don't have any jurisdiction over your thoughts or feelings. They could be totally insane, totally offensive, totally whatever. And I know that might rub some people the wrong way. But I technically cannot change or control I can't control how you think, and I can't change your mind. I believe fundamentally change is something that someone they themselves have to want it. I believe, and I've seen, and I've known people that you can present them with facts right there in front of their face, and it's still not good enough for them. So, first of all, I think when it comes to any sort of understanding or revelation or anything, you have to have like a willing vessel in the first place, you know? If you don't have that, they're just going to hold on even more to what they believe. I think one thing that shapes my opinion on this uniquely is that is my race and my gender. Now, technically I should have done some research on this, but I feel that women and BIPOC people, we have to deal so much with assumptions and microaggressions and stuff like that, to where we really have to learn the lesson of picking your battles and what is actually an offense and what is actually like something to, you know, get worked up about or whatever versus just an opinion. Because it's always been an element to our existence, if that makes sense. At least mine. And you know, I know not all of us think that way, and that's fine, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, I don't have time to be offended by every little thing, because I just don't have the energy for it. I think just in general, like in life, like it is a lot. Life is a lot, and emotionally it's taxing. And man, telling someone, excuse me, you're wrong for this opinion, you're wrong for that, it's actually too much stress, at least for me. I don't know about y'all, but for me it is. One thing that I have um realized, or no, wait, I'm sorry. Another note on the race thing is that, or was it the gender thing? I can't remember, and I totally lost the plot there for a second. But it's one of those things where it's just like, I'm not gonna get dragged into this. Sorry. I care about my peace too much. I care about my peace too much to just, because it's like, as a woman, as a black person, I feel like there's always something that you could potentially be up in arms about. And I think to a degree that could apply to anyone, but definitely to those two groups. There's always something to be up in arms about. But I don't want to live that way, you know? That's wild thinking. I don't want to live that way. Um so I've, you know, yeah, I've had to learn the lesson that like some battles are worth it and some aren't, cuz I feel like we have so many more. Um but yeah, it set me free to see that life is really subjective, and that really most things are opinions. Most of what we get upset and we say you are wrong is actually just that person's perspective. It's their upbringing speaking. It's the people they're surrounded by. Um, what am I trying to say? Thinking. It's, you know, whatever the content they engage with. Like it's all that, and it's like it's really hard to really argue with someone when you see it from that perspective, unless you think, well, I'm the epitome of understanding. I had this back and forth with someone recently, and I shouldn't have. I really shouldn't have. But it turned political. And his thinking, I'm not going to share too much about this, but his thinking was, um I was in the wrong for, okay, well, actually, first of all, let me just say how the conversation started. I had said, like, this is where I'm at. And I really wasn't up for a debate, but I kind of felt like he wanted to go. I thought it was going to be a conversation. I hate this about myself on a personal note. Like I say, I tend to go into a conversation thinking we're gonna have like an even conversation and exchange ideas, blah blah blah. And most of the time that's not the case. It's very, very rare that I've met people who can meet me on that level. Most people it becomes combative or emotional or whatever the case is. Anyways, so from the beginning I stated where my feelings on things, and he said, "That's fine that you think that way." And then not too long after that, he gave me all these reasons as to why it wasn't fine that I think the way that I do. And it's like, dude, so what you're really saying is that I should actually think about things the way you want me to, which puts you in a perfect position to be on this moral and intellectual high horse that you yourself don't even see. Like, you don't even see it as that. You think, you know, well, I'm just wrong, you know. And what really like bothered him was that I said I think a lot of politics is subjective. Okay, I'm not going to get too much into that point, but if you understand my general philosophy, you can understand. And you know, he was arguing or whatever, and he's like, well, just because you see it that way doesn't mean that that's the case. And I'm like, yeah, and just because you don't see it that way doesn't make it the case. Like, you know, I'm a well-informed, educated, I'm smart. I'm no genius, but this high horse that you have yourself on where I'm only right, or I'm sorry, I should actually say I'm wrong because you see that I'm wrong and you can't expand your mind beyond that. I don't have any like anything to I don't want to engage with someone who thinks like that. Um and so like I'll just say, like, from his perspective, what bothered him was that, what was it? He felt like I want to I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to derail it, but he felt that he said, the problem here is that you won't take responsibility for voting, not voting, whatever. And I said something to him like, no, the problem is that or actually, did I say that? I don't think I said this. Oh, I don't think I said this. I said, no, actually, and I don't know why I didn't say this. I was thinking it, but the problem is actually that you think you have jurisdiction over what I should or shouldn't do. You're so like wrapped up into this idea that I have to, I have to take responsibility. I have to do it this way because this is the answer and this is where change is going to happen and blah, blah, blah. I don't see it. I've never seen it. And it's my pastime to study this stuff. And I don't want to deviate too much, but it was just like, you think the problem is you don't, I don't understand, or I won't do this or that. But I see the problem as you started out saying that it was okay for me to have my own opinion, and then now you want to change it up. Now you want to say, but this is actually how you should think of it. No, then it's not okay for me to have my own opinion. And how many times do we do that as human beings? I know I've done it. I do it. I mean, I'm sure I do. I try not to, but I know I've done it in the past at least. How many times do we do that? And so it was this back and forth where it's like, and the crazy thing was like, I don't even know exactly what he was trying to get out of the conversation, because it wasn't like we're friends and trying to understand. Like, I mean, he was genuinely trying to tell me how to think about things and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even know you. Like, we're in the same like trivia group and that's it. Like, this is weird. But I find that I'm trying to not find it offensive, but I used to find it really offensive that people want to lord their opinions and their feelings and their thoughts over you. And this is just going to be my last point. What is really a freeing thing for me is that to realize that I don't have jurisdiction over anyone's thoughts, feelings, etc. And they in turn don't. I don't have to take on anyone's labels of me, anyone's ideas of me, anything like that. And vice versa. I don't have to like, no, you need to see it this way. I don't engage in that. And if I do, shame on me because it's just so, it's an unnecessary stress. Life is subjective. Life is pretty much almost completely subjective. Let people be. Let people think the way they want to think. Now, am I advocating for people thinking insane stuff? No. I think there's a difference between advocating for something and saying you should think this way. Basically, everything I've been talking about not doing, don't do that, versus we all have an opinion. Like at the end of the day, you can't shut down people's opinions. I mentioned the race thing, and now I remember what I wanted to say. Ever since I was young, I always was interested in the other side of any perspective. But when it came to race, that was one thing that I just never could understand because it just seems so ridiculous to me. And it is. But I was curious. So I did like watch some documentaries on the KKK and stuff and how like some of those people think. And it's interesting. I'll just put it that way. I know the popular narrative would be, no, we need to shut this down because this incentivizes other people to think that way, blah, blah, blah. In all fairness, I think whether you shut it down or not, people will gravitate towards the things that they will gravitate towards. And the things that, the things that mankind has done in the past, if you shut it down, actually, what is that quote that like, if we don't know our past, we're doomed to repeat it? Now, I'm not at all advocating for that way of thought at all, obviously. I think it's a lot of negative things that I can't even bring myself to say. But I'm also really not bothered by, and I know this is going to be kind of unpopular, but I'm not bothered by someone's view of me because I don't see it as truth, if that makes sense. It's like you can think of me as we'll flip the script for a second. You could think of me as the best person in the world. You could think of me as an angel on earth. You could think of me as whatever. Can do no wrong. You can put me on a pedestal and you would still be in the wrong. And the moment I disappoint you, it's going to be like all hell broke loose. And that would still be wrong. Your view of me that's not my business. It's really not my business. Now, when you start acting out in that way, I get that. That's different. And I know that a lot of people think that people even having those thoughts propels the actions. And to a degree, they're right. But I also don't think that there's any stopping of the thoughts. I just don't see that being a thing. The history of racism has changed throughout our time here on earth, human beings. Back in the day, I was doing some research on this. Excuse me, it wasn't so much racism that was like the thing as it was like what we would call like xenophobia, like people from that area. So it could be like a whole bunch of different races, but you would have typically like, and this is like the time of like ancient Romans, slaves and stuff would be people from certain areas, and it wouldn't actually even necessarily be anything about like their race or the area so much as it would be they would have a war and or a battle or whatever, and if you lost, you would now be their slaves. That's how slavery worked back in the day. I'm not talking about the transatlantic slavery, but everything prior to that, basically. But views on race were even different back then. And people still were discriminatory, but it seemed to take kind of a different picture, if that makes sense. Excuse me. And so I brought that up to say, like, I have heard and experienced and had some super offensive things thrown at me because of race, because of whatever. And I never felt like I need to like sit here and change your mind, because honestly, if you're going to hold on to such a wild view, I'm going to kind of contradict myself here, but I do think that you are morally and intellectually deficient. Now, that might sound terrible, but I've never heard an intelligent person give a case for being racist. Never heard of it. Or any sort of discrimination. Now, what was I gonna say? Now that point, with that point in mind, it's like that person themselves, I have heard people who have had racist views who have come out of that as well. But they themselves have to be willing to give it up. So even for me, with something as offensive as, thinking negatively about me because of how I look or whatever the case is, it's still something that I say, you know what? That ain't got nothing to do with me. You take those demons elsewhere, because I don't want to hear about it. Um, and if someone wants to sit down and have a conversation with me and actually like be able to meet me on a level where we can exchange ideas and even disagree, but do so respectfully and do so without trying to lord an opinion over someone else, I'm so down for that. I'm so down for that. But many people can't. And that's the issue. Many people, as soon as that kind of conversation comes up, political, religious, whatever, it gets very aggressive very quickly. So, all this to say, I just think that a lot of life is really subjective. A lot of the things that we're up in arms about, a lot of things that we're upset about, a lot of things that we see as you are the problem is actually just a difference of opinion. Um, a difference of upbringing. And I'm gonna drop this. This I hope that no one will come for me, but that is my view on politics. I had like kind of a thought that if you're talking to a suburban mom who hasn't really had to do much in life, had daddy, brothers taking care of her, lives in a nice house in a nice area, hasn't really been exposed to people outside of this blah blah blah, and you think you're gonna convince her that, we'll just hypothetically say, I don't want to like be that person, but we'll hypothetically say that, she's a Republican. You think that you're going to convince her about anything about how Democrats are good, how Democrats blah, 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 how Democrats whatever, how Democrats, I just said that 50 times, sorry, but like that they have anything to offer. That wouldn't even be like her world like view, her upbringing, the people that she's around. Like, and I'm saying this like kind of ironically, but also not, because I've known people who are like that. And I don't like, you have to like understand where people are at in their circumstances and their situations. And if you can't understand that, you are going to be pissed off about everything that people think and feel. But if someone's just ignorant to certain things, which we all are, there's not a single human being who knows everything. We are ignorant to something. We should at least be able to, I think, understand that and extend an amount of grace with that knowledge that there's all we all have something, you know. But anyways, I just thought about that because yeah, like I've known people who are like that. It's like, oh, like there is no other way other than the Republican way, other than the right way of looking at things from a social political standpoint. And it could be, and the same could absolutely be said in the opposite. and you're gonna argue with someone about that. Like, yo, we looking kind of silly out here in these streets, because it's like, what are you gonna do with that? They may have a moment where they start to finally realize, but it's going to take their own desire to get them there, if that makes sense. They're gonna have to be willing to even not hear but listen. Last point, I think there's a difference between hearing and listening. From my perspective, and you can look up the actual definition if you want, but hearing is like, okay, I have the capability to actually receive audio input. Great, fine, and maybe repeat it back. Listening requires an amount of understanding to be present. I personally like to engage in what's called active listening, I believe that's what it's called, where you um when you, like I said earlier, when you're listening to someone, you're not looking at the situation or whatever to try and prove them wrong or see where they're wrong. You're trying to actually build with them and see, it's like, I could see your point there, you know. But that's just me. I hope this wasn't too much of a rant. Sorry about that. But next week I think I'm gonna have to do some research on this one, because it needs research. But next week I'll do the topic on AI from different perspectives, and I'm gonna take it from every angle that I can possibly think of, not just, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose our jobs, or oh my gosh, the economy. I'm gonna dissect it in every way that I can, but that's gonna take a minute, so see you next week.